Okay, good morning, everyone. We are in Sanhedrin. Where are we? We are on page 13b, Daf Yud Gimel Amud Bet, and we are about halfway down the page in the Vilna Shas. If you're in the Steinsaltz, it's on page 69, and I'll put it on the screen in a moment. And what we were talking about last week, for those of you who recall, we were talking about semicha. And the semicha that we were talking about was not the semicha of rabbis, it was the semicha of behemoths. Some would say it's the same thing. We were talking about the laying on of hands, the leaning on the head of the bull for the sin offerings and what have you that were brought in the temple. They had to be leaned upon. And there was a discussion between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda as to how many people needed to, how many judges needed to lean upon this bull for the purposes of the offering. One said 3 and one said 5. And we went through a bit of a ping pong back and forth discussion between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda as to how they came to 3 and 5 using plural verbs and plural subjects, and then the concept that we can't have a bet din, which is an even number. And that's what we did last time. And now we're going to see that there is another brisa which talks about semicha, and we are going to talk about semicha of rabbis this week. Leon, if you could get up Bamidbar chapter 27, if you haven't already got it, we're going to need it in a minute.
Yes, I have it.
You have it, okay. I don't have it on the screen, so let me just get hold of that. Here we go. Bamidbar 27, I think it is, isn't it?
Yes. Verse 23.
Thank you. Right, we've got that ready to go when we need it. Right. So we are going to talk about that. Let me go straight to the Gemarah. What have you got on the screen there? Nothing.
Oh, no. Right, Gemarah.
You got it now?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. See the little S there, the little red S? That tells us where we're at a good place to begin or to stop. Tana, it was taught in a Braita. Smicha or smichat zekenim bishlosha. Smicha, the leaning, the laying of hands, and the laying of hands of the elders is done with 3 judges. So you're going to say to me, what's the difference between smicha and smichat zekenim? Well, that's exactly what the Gemarah asks. Just turn this icon off. Okay. And that's what the Gemarah asks. My smicha umay smichat zekenim. What is meant by the term smicha, and what is meant by the term smichat zekenim, the laying of hands of the elders? Well, we know that one of these terms must refer to what we were talking about last week, okay? Because that's why we're talking about it. The pasuk said, "V'samchu yedehem al rosh hapar," and they shall v'samchu ziknei ha'edah et yidehem al rosh hapar. That was the pasuk. And the elders shall lean their hands upon the head of the bull. That's what we were talking about last week. Here we go. Smichat Zakenim, it was called in the Mishnah. Now we've got a brisa over here that says smicha and smichat Zakenim requires 3 judges. So what's what, says the Gemara. So we know that smichat Zakenim we've already just talked about last week. That was the procedure of leaning the hands on the head of the bull before offering it. So smicha must mean something else. Amar Rabbi Yochanan says mismach sabei. What word can you see in that word sabei?
Grandpa.
Say that again, Leon.
Grandpa.
Yes, grandpa. Saba. Exactly. So if you're a grandpa, then you need smicha according to this, but that's not quite what it means. What it means is Amar Rabbi Yochanan mismach sabei. This is the ordination of elders. Saba means the elder, the senior person in the family. So here it means what we would call smichat rabbanim, the smicha of rabbis. That's what Rabbi Yochanan says. Okay, so Rabbi Yosef has got a question. He says, hang on a minute. Amalei Abaya the Rabbi Yosef. Abaya asked Rabbi Yosef, mismach sabei bishlosha minalan. How do we know what's the source of the statement that we need 3 judges to ordain a rabbi? We've just made that statement in the Brisa, but it hasn't given us any source for that, any proof, any indication as to where it comes from. And Abaya wants to know where we get it from. And he asks, and he says like this, Ilema, if we'll say midichtiv, it comes from the pasuk. Okay, let's just stop there before we go into that. From where do we know the whole concept of smicha? From where do we know the whole concept that to ordain a rabbi is called smicha? Is called leaning. Anybody know? Anyone? Leon?
Yes, I know because I have looked it up. It's in Parashat Pinchas, when Moses told Elazar, the Kohen, and told him to be to take over the nation.
Okay, let's have a look and see. It's in Parshas Pinchas, but it's not actually that bit. We'll have a look now. We'll go straight into Parashat Pinchas from last week's Parsha, Bamidbar chapter 27. And let's go from verse 16, Leon. Now let's just set the scene. Moshe has been told that he's not allowed to go into the land. So Moshe then says to God, well, who's going to take him in? Let me just put the pasuk on the screen for you. We're going to go from verse 16. So Well, go from verse 15.
Moses spoke to Hashem, saying, "May Hashem, God of the spirits of all flesh, appoint a man over the assembly, who shall go out before them and come in before them, who shall take them out and bring them in. And let the assembly of Hashem not be like sheep that have no shepherd."
Okay, stop there a sec. So Moshe says, we need to have a leader. You've just told me I'm not going to be the leader that takes them in. Somebody's got to take over, says Moshe to God. Bit of a funny conversation, really. You would have expected God to know that on his own, really. But anyway, Moshe reminds him that he needs a leader. And so Hashem says, okay, you're right. Verse 18.
Hashem said to Moses, "Take to yourself Joshua, son of Nun, a man in whom there is spirit, and lean your hand upon him."
Stop there. Stop there. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Kach lecha et Yoshua bin Nun, take for yourself Yoshua bin Nun, ish asher ruach bo, a man who's got spirit in him, v'samachta et yadacha alav. V'samachta. Can you see that word there? That's semicha. And you shall lean your hand, yadacha in the singular. You lean your hand alav upon him. V'samachta. Not to be confused with v'samachta b'chagecha, and you shall celebrate your festivals. You shall be joyous in your festivals. That's with a sin, not with a samach. You can see here that letter is a samach, samachta, and the ch sound is a chaf, as opposed to v'samachta b'chagecha. You shall be joyous on your festivals, which we say generally speaking at Sukkot. That is spelt with a sin and not a samach, and with a chet and not a chaf. It sounds exactly the same word if you pronounce it in an Ashkenaz pronunciation and not a Taimani pronunciation, v'samachta. And here it means, the way it's spelled here, it means you shall lean. And that is the origin of semicha. What was Moshe doing to Joshua? He was ordaining him as the leader of the people, as the rabbi of the people, so to speak. Okay, and so now let's go on and see exactly what happens in the next few psukim. Verse 19.
Yes. "You shall stand him before Eleazar the Kohen and before the entire assembly, and command him before their eyes. You shall place some of your majesty upon him, so that the entire assembly of Israel will pay heed."
Stop there. There's two processes going on here, isn't there? The first process is Moshe leaning his hand upon Yoshua's body, head, presumably. It doesn't say so, it just says alav on him. And the second thing is presenting him before Eleazar HaKohen and presenting him in front of all the people. And that is how Yoshua became the leader. So he gets his semicha from Moshe, and then he is, as it were, confirmed by the Eleazar. Why not Aaron a Cohen? Why Eleazar? Anyone? Why not Aaron? David? You're muted. You're right, but you're muted.
Yeah, he died in the parashat Chukat.
Yeah, Aaron's died already. That's why, not Aaron a Cohen. Eleazar has taken over by this time. So he stands before the Kohen Gadol, and he is presented to the entire congregation and you shall bestow some of your majesty upon him, so that all the congregation of the children of Israel will take heed. So in other words, this is a handing over of some of Moshe's authority to Yoshua at this point. Now, if you think everybody here, other than Stanley, is familiar with the United Synagogue approach to Judaism, where when you have a new rabbi comes to a shul, he presents his semicha, he has to have his semicha, and then what happens? He has an induction ceremony, doesn't he? Where the chief rabbi comes and officially inducts him into office. Sometimes it can take several years before that happens, but nevertheless, it usually happens at some point or another. And in some ways, what they're doing, I don't know whether this was the thought process behind it, however many decades ago this process was first done, but this is reminiscent of what we've just seen, isn't it? He's got his smicha, this rabbi, but then he's presented before all the people, before Elazar HaKohen, the Kohen Gadol, the chief rabbi. Okay, so it's a confirmation in you, if you like, in the eyes of the people, that this rabbi is now the leader of this congregation. So I thought that was interesting, that this ceremony that Moshe had to do in front of Elazar HaKohen, and more importantly, in front of the congregation, so that they will take heed. Lama'an yishma'u, in order that they will listen to him. And the reason that they would listen to him is because he's got Moshe's approval. He's got Moshe's, stamp of approval. He's got his hechsher, really, hasn't he? By him giving him the smicha. Okay, and so that is what happened. Verse 21.
Before Elazar the Kohen shall he stand, who shall inquire for him of the judgment of the Urim before Hashem. At his word shall they go out, and at his word shall they come in, he and all the children of Israel with him, and the entire assembly. Moses did as Hashem commanded him. He took Joshua and stood him before Elazar the Kohen and before the entire assembly. He leaned his hands upon him and commanded him as Hashem had spoken through Moses.
Okay, and there it is. Now, what difference do you see between what Hashem told him to do, what Hashem told Moshe to do, and what Moshe did? Anyone spot the difference? You know, it's like those pictures that you'd see where you've got to spot the differences.
Isn't it the order of whether you lay the hands on first and present, or do it the other way round? Isn't the first one he laid the hands on and then presented, and here he presents and then lays the hands on?
That's true. That's true. I hadn't noticed that, but you're quite right, Avril.
So what transfers the authority? Is it the presenting or the laying on of hands, or has that got to be witnessed? And those are the things that cross my mind.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think the way that Moshe did it gives it more authority, doesn't it? Because he's presenting him, and he's actually doing the laying of hands, as it were, in front of everybody. Whereas the way Hashem said was, take for yourself, kach lecha, take for yourself, indicating to me that that's a private ceremony. But he didn't. It seems to me he did it as a public ceremony. And perhaps the reason for that was what we spoke about. That's very good, Avril. There is another difference that I had spotted. I didn't spot that one. What are the differences? The David, you've spotted it, I think.
Yeah, he's commanded to place his hand on Joshua, and he places both hands.
Yes, v'samachta et yadacha in the singular. Vayismoch, and he leaned et yadav in the plural. He leaned both hands. Now, anybody like to suggest any kind of explanation for that. I've not read any explanation for that, but I have a thought myself, which I'll share with you once anybody else has had a stab. Michael.
Moshe was getting a little bit old and therefore had to support himself.
Ever the practical one, Michael, ever the practical one. Anyone else? Okay, I'll tell you what I thought. The idea of laying on a hand is obviously to be a conduit. It's almost like a physical transmission of knowledge, and in fact, what he's told to do is to give him some of your glory. What does it say? You shall bestow some of your majesty upon him. So it's almost as if the majesty is sort of going through the hand, as it were. And I would like to think that Moshe put both hands on him to indicate that this was a wholehearted handing over. This wasn't a half-hearted thing, but by putting both hands on him, it's indicating that I'm passing over to you entirely the authority. It's not a half-hearted affair. This is a fully appropriate thing to do, and I'm happy to do it with both hands. It's like we say, I suppose, when you take an opportunity, you'd say, well, I'll grab it with both hands. The indication is that, you do it wholeheartedly. That's what I thought. I mean, as I say, I've not read that anywhere. It's just something that occurred to me. Leon.
Like the queen bestows a knighthood, she puts the sword on one shoulder and then she puts the sword on the other shoulder.
Okay, very good. Maybe that's where this comes from. Maybe where that comes from. Of course, the queen doesn't touch anybody directly. That's why she wears gloves when she shakes hands, etc. So this could well be the equivalent of a semicha from the queen. Yes, David.
Yeah, you're in good company here. This is exactly Rashi's pshat, and a number of midrashic ideas of why Moshe does this, is able to do this wholeheartedly. First of all, you've got the connection between what appears previously in Parashat Pinchas, i.e. the inheritance of Benot Tzlofchad. And the Midrash there points out that once Moses was giving the laws from Hashem on inheritance, he was wondering whether his children would be fit to inherit from him, and in particular to inherit the leadership.
As had Elazar just shortly earlier on from his brother,
from his father Aaron, absolutely. Yeah. And you could have suggested that when Moshe was told to appoint Yoshua, that it wasn't wholehearted, that he had something inside him, that he resented the fact that his children weren't able to succeed him. Therefore, to remove this idea, the Torah emphasizes that he did this with both of his hands to indicate that he was fully supported. He went beyond the call of duty to indicate this. And this is Rashi's pshat.
Okay, so I am in good company there, aren't I?
Yeah.
Not often I agree with Rashi, or Rashi agrees with me, but there you go. Excellent. All right. So that's where the concept of semicha, of leaning on, comes from. And that's why when a rabbi is ordained, it's called semicha. Now, does a rabbi... Okay, not answer that. Ask that question yet. Okay, so this semicha of Moshe to Yoshua is not just a passing on of authority. It's also a passing on of a role of not just of leader, but of something else. What else was this this smicha of Moshe to Yoshua passing on. What was Yoshua's role other than leader? I've perhaps not phrased the question so well, because if I phrase it exactly the way I think I want to phrase it, the answer will be obvious. Okay, what was Moshe's role in the people in the desert with the people? Michael?
Speaking to Hashem.
Yes, he was the conduit to Hashem, and that is
a much higher level of prophecy that Yoshua would now have.
Okay, that's true. He did have a high level of prophecy. Lo kamba Yisrael ka Moshe. No prophet ever arose as great as Moshe. But what was his real and main role? What do we call Moshe? What is his name? Moshe?
Teacher.
Rabbeinu, correct. Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe, our teacher. So in effect, what he was doing, although we don't call Yoshua Rabbeinu, he was in fact taking on the role of teacher, because he had to teach the halachot. He had to, and as you say, Michael, he had to be the conduit to Hashem. All the Nevi'im were the conduit for Hashem's messages, and they had to teach that to the people. So this smicha was a passing on of the role, not only of leadership, it was a passing on of the role of teacher. And that is primarily what smicha is. What is the word rabbi? How do you say rabbi in Hebrew? Rabbi, which means, translated, Rabbi means my master, right? Rav, greater. Rav is much. So Rabbi is my person who's got greater knowledge than me, my teacher. We call it, in modern Hebrew, we call a teacher a moreh, or a female teacher, a morah. And that comes from the word Torah. Lahorot is to show the way, to teach. But Rabbi is another word. So Rabbi means my teacher. So when Moshe was giving smicha to Yoshua, that was passing on the role of teacher. Now, why am I laboring this point? Because that chain of smicha, which is what we call it, Moshe to Yoshua, Yoshua to the Zekenim, etc., all the way down, one person who had smicha, who got smicha. What do you call somebody who got smicha, who received smicha, as well as the title Rabbi? What is he called? He's called the passive conjugation of the word smicha, which is musmach. Somebody who has got smicha is called a musmach.
Certified.
Yes. What is a document in Hebrew? Musmach is a document, because a document certifies something, doesn't it? Yes. So if you go to the bank, they will ask you for all sorts of musmachim, right? They'll want all sorts of documents from you. So a rabbi, an ordained rabbi, is called a musmach. So this chain of passing on of the title of teacher, or the role of teacher, and the title of rabbi was unbroken from Moshe to Yoshua, to the Zekenim, to the elders, and to their pupils. All the way through, you had this unbroken chain. In other words, until a certain point in history, which we'll talk about in a second, until a certain point in history, anybody who had the title of rabbi, who was a musmach, could trace their smicha in a direct link back to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe to Yoshua, to the Zekenim, to their pupils, to their pupils, to their pupils, to their pupils. And only somebody who was a musmach could give smicha. And that chain got broken. Does anybody know when the chain of smicha stopped?
The destruction of the Bayit HaRishon.
No, much later than that, Marcel, much later than that. You would have thought that that would be the case, but actually that wasn't the case because of Rabbi Yochanan. Well, because of the fact that they went into Bavel with their teacher, with their musmachim, and they continued to give smicha right through Bayit Sheni, and the last smicha, the smicha stopped sometime around the 4th or 5th century CE. So around about the time of the Gemarah. So at the time of the Mishnah, which was in the 2nd, 3rd century CE, there were still musmachim, and it stopped around about the 4th or 5th century CE. So those people who have a smicha today are not truly musmachim in the original sense of the word, because that chain of smicha was broken. It was a chain that lasted a very long time. How long did it last? We're talking about 1,500 years ago. Moshe received the Torah 3,300 years ago. So we're talking 1,800 years that chain of smicha lasted. So today's smicha is a different thing. It's not a smicha in the true sense of the word, because we don't have any musmachim anymore, any true musmachim. And we'll talk about today's smicha in a minute. So let's just go back to the Gemarah for a second, because what we're talking about here is the smicha of them, the smicha of the chain of smicha. That's what the Gemarah is talking about. Let's just put the Gemarah back on the screen for you. Okay, tell me when you've got it, please. Yeah, okay. So, Abaye asks the question, Mismach Save, the giving over of smicha, the ordination of elders, of rabbis, Bishlosha, requiring 3 judges, Minalan, where do we get it from? And he says, if you're going to tell me it's from the pasuk that we've just read, that Moshe laid his hands upon Yoshua, if you're going to tell me that's the source of the smicha, ihachi tisgei bechad, one should be enough. Moshe did it on his own. Okay, Moshe did this on his own. He did not have, there were not 3 people there. There was only Moshe that did it. Vayismoch is in the singular, and he leaned et yadav, his hands. If it was plural, what would it say? If there were 3 of them, what would it say? It would say vayismachu et yedehem. They leaned their hands. That's not what it says. Oh, look, there's Marcel's great-grandson. That's nice. Those of you who can see Marcel's camera, he's making a phone call. Nice. He's learning Torah with his great-grandfather. How nice is that? That's nachas, Marcel. Enjoy. Okay, so vayismachu et yedehem, it should have said. But it doesn't. It says vayismoch et yadav alav. So Abaye says to Rav Yosef, it can't be from that, because then 1 would be enough. So you're going to tell me that Moshe's worth 3. Not having that, he says. And if you'll say Moshe bimkom shivim v'chad ka'i, there is a concept that Moshe, Leon and I learned this when we were learning yesterday, actually. We're learning a little bit further on in chapter 2. We had this idea that Moshe was considered to be at the same level as 71 judges. Moshe himself was so great that he was as great as the 71 judges of the Sanhedrin. So says Abaye, if you're going to come and tell me that Moshe's worth 71, it in that case, I should require 71 judges for smicha. So I'm a bit struggling, really, says Abaye, to understand this brisa that says smichat rabbanim, the smicha handed to rabbis requires 3 judges. And the Gemara says, kasha, taka, it's difficult. I don't know the answer, says the Gemara. Over here, you can see on the right-hand side of the page, Rav Steinsaltz gives a summary of several answers that were given. Several answers to the Gemara's questions have been suggested. Some surmise that there may have been 2 other individuals with Moses when he ordained Joshua, but these were not mentioned by the verse due to Moses's honor. Well, that's a bit of a waste of time, isn't it? Because if you've just got if you've got 2 people who are just there make weights, making up the numbers, first of all, nobody's going to argue with Moshe. If Moshe says X, they're not going to say, well, actually, I think it's Y. So, and that's just lip service. So, personally, I'm not happy with that answer. Rabbi David Pardo suggests that when judges are ordained, they are granted the status to be called Elohim, which we would normally translate as gods. But we've had this before, haven't we? Right at the beginning, we learned the whole idea that we need 3 judges in a bet din from the pasuk that says a ganaf, a thief who is caught, has to draw near Elohim, to the judges. So Elohim means judges, and therefore those appointing them must have this status as well. Ordinarily, a court of 3 is called Elohim. That's what we were saying right back in November 2019 when we first did the Mishnah, that Elohim refers to judges. Moses was an exception to the rule, as he himself is sometimes called by this term. See Exodus 7:1. Let's have a look at Exodus 7:1 and see what that says. Let me just get it up on the screen for you. Exodus 7:1. Where are we? Exodus 7:1. It's in Parshat Va'era. There we go. There we go. Look at the pasuk. Can you see it on the screen, or do I need to stop the share and reshare? Can you see it? No, you can't. Okay, let me show it you. This would be a very good. This will be a very good quiz question. Where is Moshe referred to as Elohim? I didn't know this. I'm sure David knew it because he knows all of these things, but I didn't know it. Vayoma Hashem el Moshe, Re'ei netaticha Elohim lefaro, ve'aron achicha yiyeh neviecha. Leon, read that for us, please. Verse 1. You're muted, Leon.
Hashem said to Moses, "See, I have made you a master over Pharaoh, and Aaron your brother shall be your spokesman."
Okay, so this, of course, is when Moshe's trying to wheedle out of going to be the leader, and he says, I'm no good at this, and says, Hashem says, yes, you are. You don't need to be able to speak. Aaron will be your spokesman, but I have made you Elohim leFaro, a master or a lord over Pharaoh. So that is the explanation in our Gemarah. Well, it's not in our Gemarah. The explanation of our Gemarah to the kasha that is said, we don't know where it comes from, is that it comes from this pasuk of Vayismoch Yadav et Yadav alav, but the Moshe is called Elohim. And therefore, because Elohim normally refers to a court of 3 when it's not referring to God, Moshe is the equivalent of 3. That's quite a bit of a convoluted argument, but it's better than the first one that says there were 2 Nochschleppers sitting on either side of Moshe, just there for the ride. So that's interesting. Now,
Johnny, if you've got the art scroll in front of you, and
I do actually.
I know Leon has as well. Have a look at note 26.
Yes, I remember reading that last night when I prepared. Yes, I'll mention that. What David's referring to is that in a different version of the Gemarah. Remember, the Gemarahs that we have are basically copies of handwritten manuscripts of conversations that took place between these rabbis. So there is room for error and room for different versions of it. The Yad Ramah has a version in which the word shlosha does not appear. And so according to this reading, says the footnote, the Gemarah seeks the source only for the practice of ordination and not for the requirement that it be conferred by 3 judges. Either way, the Gemarah's answer cites only the source for the practice of ordination, and it never presents the source for requiring that 3 confer ordination. So it would seem, well, our Gemarah does have a discussion about it, but it doesn't come to a conclusion. And it doesn't have much of a discussion. You'd have expected somebody to come up with a bit more of a, I mean, we've seen Gemarahs, haven't we, which are far, far more convoluted and what I will call much more of a dray than this. So you would have expected a bit more than that. And I think the Yad Ramah, in quoting that version, is saying, well, actually, that word bishlosha actually shouldn't even be there. And what the Gemarah was seeking was the source for the process of ordination of rabbis being a semicha, a laying on of hands.
But by the way, that there is an earlier reference to Moshe being referred to as Elohim.
Okay, where's that?
Chapter, also Shemot, chapter 4, verse 16.
Okay, let's have a look at that. Chapter 4, verse 16. Okay. Leon, do you want to read it out to us?
It's not showing.
Oh, it's not showing. Sorry.
Yes.
Chapter 4, verse 16 of Shemot.
He shall speak for you to the people, and it will be that he will be your mouth, and you will be his leader. And his staff you shall take in your hand, with which you shall perform the signs.
Okay, so there it is there. V'ata tiyeh lo le'Elohim. And he will speak for you. This is the same idea. This is the same idea. This is just beforehand, where we said before, chapter 7 is the next sort of stage in the story. Here, it's when Moshe is trying to wheedle out of it, and Shem says, he says, I can't speak. I'm a stutterer. And he says, don't worry about it. Aaron will speak to you, and you will be his leader. V'ata tiyeh lo le'Elohim. So there you go. Very good. Any others, David, or are those the only 2 places he's referred to as Elohim?
I can't remember if there are any others. One other interesting point on what you were talking about 5 minutes ago, about why Moshe placed both of his hands on Yoshua, is an interesting comment from the Chizkuni, another French commentator, which connects the 2 parts of the Gemarah that we've been learning with the semicha of the elders on the par. It required both hands. And the Chizkuni says one goes with the other to show that this is the authority from Hashem, that it's Hashem's authority, as it were, who is going to pardon those who were responsible for making this Pesach Halacha in error. And similarly, Moshe was giving over this responsibility from Hashem.
I think that makes sense, because if you look at the Bryce that we started with this morning, it puts them together, doesn't it? Exactly. The Bryce says smicha or smichat zekenim bishlosha. It groups together the smichat rabbanim the ordination of rabbis and this laying of hands on the bull for the Par Ne'elam, for this special bull offering where the community has sinned due to an error of the Bet Din, we talked about last week. It lumps them together, so that makes sense to look. If it makes sense if one requires two hands to be leaned upon, then you'd expect the other one to require two hands as well. And in fact, that leads us very nicely into the next piece of Gemarah that we're going to see, which we've got time just to start, because Rav Acha Barei de Rava, Rav Acha, the son of Rava, Leon, that was, and I know you're not good at names, Leon, but that's the name of the chap we were talking about yesterday as well. Do you remember? And you said, I probably won't remember that. I'll just say he. Well, it's the same chap. Okay, yes. Rav Acha Barei de Rava, Le Rav Ashi, and he asked him a question. Bida mamash samchin lei? Do they actually literally put their hands on him, lean on him? Why would they ask that question? Why would they ask that question? I'm struggling with that, really. Have a look over here. Samchin lei bishma, they ordain him by name. How are sages ordained? There's no need to physically lay hands upon them. Rather, one is to be publicly called Rabbi and told you are hereby ordained. Okay, so that's the next bit of the Gemarah. But I don't know why they would ask that question. If it says that you need to have semicha, and we prove semicha comes from Moshe Rabbeinu to Yoshua, and we know that Moshe lay his hands on Yoshua because it says so. By Yismoch et Yadav Alav, he leaned his hands upon it. So why would you think that you don't need to do that? Can anybody help me?
Does the last note of the halakha help you with those two sources, Rambam Sefer Shoftim Hilchot Sanhedrin 4:2?
Not really. I'll tell you why. Because it's a chicken and an egg, Michael. Rambam bases his halachot in Sefer Shoftim Hilchot Sanhedrin on this Gemarah.
Oh, okay.
Rather than the other way around. On the basis of this Gemarah that we're going to learn now, which says, no, you don't need to lean your hands on him, that's his psak. But I'm a bit confused as why you would think you wouldn't need to do that when we've proved from the pasuk how you do it, and then you're telling me actually you don't do it like that at all. And secondly, why not? Why is the halacha that you don't lay the hands on? I don't have any answers to these questions, by the way. These are just questions that have occurred to me whilst I was preparing the shir. And they will be the kind of questions I will be asking the Maggid Shir, who was giving me this shir. Well, unfortunately, you've got me to ask, and I don't know the answers. So, but anybody got any suggestions?
Can I hazard a guess?
Go on, let's see.
That you just said earlier that the semicha that we're talking about ended around the end of the 4th century. I'm not sure about the dates of the Amoraim that we're talking about here, but is it possible that they're discussing a post-semicha?
Okay, possibly. It doesn't say that though, does it?
No.
And I didn't read it like that. I understood that they were talking about real semicha, if we'll call it that. Okay, well, that's something for us all to think about for next week. I will make some. I'll make some research into that as well and see if we can find why. Because it is a good question, isn't it? It's not just me, is it? I mean, it's a good question. the Gemarah is at pains to point out why you have to do smicha, and then you say, actually, you don't really need to do it. Because let's learn the next Gemarah. He says, do we really need to lean our hands? Amalei said, no. Samchin le bishma. We ordain him by name. Karile Rabbi. He's called Rabbi. Vayahavai le rishuta lemedan dinei knasot. And we give him permission to adjudicate laws involving fines. And I'm not going to go into that now because that's going to take us a few minutes. I'm going to go into that next week, why fines are particularly relevant to this. But for the moment, what I want to concentrate on is that the answer given by the Gemarah is that you do not need to lay your hands on somebody that you're giving smicha to. What you do is you announce it publicly that he is, and you give him the title Rabbi. And that's why it's important that rabbis who are rabbis of communities and what have you are called Rabbi, because they get their authority from their title and from the fact that people recognize that. Now, for example, when I was a kid, the rabbi of my shul was called Rabbi Gerdus, Zichrono Livracha. Marcel will remember him very well. Avril, I don't know if you remember Rabbi Gerdus as well. He was a lovely man. He was a lovely man. Did I know his first name? I did not. I know it now. His name was Menachem Mendel. But Rabbi, I just knew he was Rabbi M.M. Gerdus. I wouldn't have dreamed of using his first name. My son is known as Rabbi Dan and has been in all of his communities. Now, that's fine because that's how things are today. Is a lot more informal. But some people call him Dan. And he's not bothered. But his wife, Liat, is bothered and does not like people to call him Dan. It doesn't mind him calling Rabbi Dan. And I think she's right. I think people in the community should refer to him as Rabbi Dan, because that is what gives him his authority in the community. And Jeffrey's not with us today, but I have to tell you, Jeffrey, who's known Dan, well, he's known me, he's known Dan's father since the day I was born, never mind Dan. From the moment that Dan went to be the assistant rabbi in Jeffrey's community, Jeffrey gave him the kavod of calling him Rabbi Dan, even though he's known him since he was born and he's known even me since I was born. And I think that speaks very highly for Jeffrey, because that's giving kavod to the title, not to the person, it's to the title. And what that title means is the leader of the community. And I think that's very important. So the ordination, the ordaining of a rabbi is done by calling him rabbi and giving him permission to do judgments. I just want to show you a couple of modern day smichas and what they say. There's all sorts of different types of smichot today. The smicha of a community rabbi, the reason for there are different types of smicha are you need different skills for different things, right? If you're a doctor, you need a different skill if you're a surgeon to if you are a pathologist, to if you are a endocrinologist or a gynecologist. You need different skills. It's not just one skill. So same with rabbis. If you're going to be a rabbi who's going to be a community rabbi, then you need the skills of a community rabbi. You need to know the halachot of the life cycle. You need to know all the halachot of avelut. You need to know the halachot of ketubot and kiddushin. If you're going to be a dayan in a bet din, then you need to know the halachot of gerut. You need to know the halachot of gittin. You need to know the halachot of monetary things. So it's a different type of smicha. And various different types of smicha are available. So I'm going to first of all show you a smicha which is what I would call a practical based smicha, a smicha which is designed for the rabbis of communities, because it is a smicha that concentrates on the halachot that they would be asked to about. So the halachot of avelot, of the chagim, what you do on Yom Tov, kashrut, all the kind of things that you would go to your community rabbi for. That's the kind of thing that this kind of smicha teaches you. And I'm going to put it on the screen and show it to you now, if I can just find it. Hang on. There it is. I just need to switch it round though. Oh, it's on sideways. I don't know how to do that. Okay, I can't actually, well, I can put it on the screen, but it'll be sideways. Never mind, hang on a sec. And then I'll show it you the right way up. Right, can you see that on the screen now? I know it's sideways on. Either stand on your head or what have you. But that is my smicha, okay? And I'm going to just show it you now on the, I don't know if you probably can't do it. Let me just take off the background. One sec. Right, if I show you that in front of there, you ought to be able to see it. Okay, now what it says on there is, if you have a look, 1, 2, 3. If you have a look at the second wide line, okay, the second wide line says Al-Kain, begins Al-Kain. Can you see that? Al-Kain amarnu lahachtiro b'to'a rav u'manhig b'Yisrael. Can you see that just above my name? Yeah? Okay, so what that says is, therefore, it tells you all the things that I've learned, and it says, therefore, we have said that it is fitting to crown him with the title Rav Umanhig, which means a rabbi and a leader, b'Yisrael. V'ra'ui sheyikra shemo l'chol davar b'kedusha, and it is fitting they should call him for all matters of kedusha. And maybe you can see the word over there, Harav Yaakov Tzvi Hirsch, Harav over there. Okay, now that is the equivalent of calling him rabbi. That's a certificate to say that I have learned what I need to be learn to be a Rav Umanhig. So that's the kind of smicha that I did, was the one for to be a community rabbi. So now I'm going to show you a different one. I'm going to show you a different smicha now, if I can find it. 1 second. There it is. Just get it on the screen for you. This should not be on the side. This should be the right way up. You can see that smicha now, Rabbi Z.N. Goldberg. This is the smicha of my son Dan, from Rabbi Zalman Nehemiah Goldberg, Af Beit Din of Hara Hayashar Ve'atov, member of the Supreme Rabbinical Court. Now, all this lot says that he is, Dan has learned all the things that he needs to learn, and I have tested him with many questions, and I'm satisfied that he knows all of the things that he needs to know, and he, Al-Kain, therefore, Yadi Tichon Oto, L'Somcho, it's fitting for me, says Reb Zalman Nehemiah Goldberg, it's fitting to me, L'Somcho, to give him smicha, B'smichut Chachamim, with the smicha of Chachamim. See over there where I'm pointing, Yore, Yore. Okay, Yora. That's from the word Torah. He has a smicha, a different type of smicha. He's not got a Ravu Manhig smicha, although he's got that as well. But this one is a Yora smicha. This allows him to pasken halacha in various different non-community type cases. So sort of minor bet din cases. What he's learning at the moment, he's learning now to be a dayan. And that is a different smicha. That once he does that, please God, another 3 years or so, he will get one that says same sort of thing, but instead of Yora, he will get one that says Yadin. So what does that mean? It really should have a question mark after the first Yora and an exclamation mark after the second, because it goes like this. Therefore, it's fitting to give him the smicha of Chachamim. Yora, is he fitting to pasken halacha? Question mark. Yora, yes, he is. And when it comes to the Yadin, who the Dayan gets, it's Yadin, question mark. Is he fitting to pasken halacha of monetary matters? Yadin, yes, he is. So that's just 3 examples of different smicha that you can get. And again, it depends on what you want. None of them involve the laying of hands. Okay, none of them involve true smicha. I thought I was going to get my head leaned on when I went. I was rather disappointed that Rabbi Chaim Brovinder, who gave me my smicha, just handed my certificate and shook my hand and said, "What a fine fellow I was." I was waiting for the laying on of hands, and it never happened. So none of them involve laying on of hands. You can have Ravu Manhig, you can have Yora, you can have Yadin, or you can have all 3. There you are. That's just a little trip into the various different smichot that are available today. But these are not the smicha of the Gemarah. This is not the smicha of Moshe Rabbeinu to Yoshua, which stopped sometime in the 4th or 5th century CE. So let's just have a little summary of what we've done today in the Gemarah. We have talked about the origins of the word smicha, and somewhat ironically, the origin does not translate into the actions of smicha. Even it seems real smicha in the chain of smicha did not need to have the laying of the hands. Only Moshe did that to Yoshua, seemingly, and we're going to try and find out if we can find out a reason for that during the next week. We saw where Moshe is called Elohim twice in the Torah, and therefore it's those who want to say that you need 3 people for a smicha can say that Moshe is worth 3 because he's referred to as Elohim, which is used as a court of law, which we know is minimum judges, number of judges is 3. And then we had a little look at different types of smicha that are available today. Any questions or comments? No? Okay, right. Homework for this week. Find out why smicha did not require smicha. Okay, Shavua Tov, everyone.
Rabbi Dr. Jonathan.
Thank you, Johnny.
Bye.
Thank you, Johnny.